In this video, you're going to discover why most people retire broke, not because they didn't work hard, not because they didn't save at all, not because they made one big mistake, but because of something else entirely, something almost nobody talks about. Because here's something most people never stop to consider. The people who retire with nothing are usually not the ones you'd expect. They didn't gamble their money away. They didn't live recklessly. Many of them did everything right, on paper. Think about someone you know, someone who worked their entire life, showed up every single day, paid their bills, raised their family, never complained. Someone you've always seen as responsible, as careful, as someone who had it together. And then one day, you hear that they're still working at 70, or that their retirement savings ran out in 3 years, or that they're depending completely on their children now. How does that happen? How does someone follow all the rules, work for over 40 years, and still end up with nothing to show for it? While someone else, earning the exact same income, living a similar life, somehow retires with enough to actually live. That question matters more than most people realize, because it's not really about money at all. It's about a handful of quiet decisions made over decades that nobody warns you about until it's too late. It's not about how much you earn. It's not about luck. It's not about the economy or the stock market. It's about something much closer to home, something so ordinary, so easy to ignore, that most people repeat the same mistake year after year without ever noticing what it's costing them. The people who retire broke are not the exception. They are the majority. They are your neighbors, your coworkers, maybe even someone in your own family, living lives that look completely fine from the outside while quietly running out of time on the inside. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to hear might be the difference between the retirement you're hoping for and the one you're actually heading toward. To understand why most people retire broke, we have to go back further than retirement itself. We have to go back to the moment the plan was first sold to them, because almost everyone alive today grew up hearing the same version of the story: go to school, get good grades, find a stable job, work there for 30 or 40 years, put a little money aside, and when the time comes, retirement will simply happen. It sounds simple, it sounds safe, it sounds like something that has always worked, and for a while, it actually did. Go back 70 years, and you'll find a completely different financial world. One where a single income could support an entire family, where a modest house was actually affordable on an average salary, where many companies offered something called a pension, a guaranteed income for life, simply for staying loyal to one employer for decades. In that world, retirement wasn't something you had to build. It was something that was handed to you. You worked, you retired, and the money was just there. That system created an entire generation's expectations that got passed down from parents to children, almost like an inherited belief. The belief that retirement is something that happens automatically, as long as you work hard and stay responsible. But somewhere between then and now, that system quietly disappeared. Pensions became rare, then rarer, then almost extinct in most industries. They were replaced with something that sounds similar, but works completely differently: retirement accounts that depend entirely on what you personally contribute and what you personally understand about investing. The responsibility shifted, almost silently, from the employer to the individual. But here's what makes this so dangerous. Nobody sent out an announcement. Nobody sat people down and said, "The rules have changed. You are now fully responsible for your own future." The story stayed the same. Work hard, stay loyal, save what you can, and you'll be fine. Except it wasn't true anymore, and most people never got the memo. They kept following the old instructions in a completely new financial world, not because they were careless, but because nobody ever told them the map had changed. That's the origin of the problem. not laziness, not bad luck. A quiet, invisible shift in how retirement actually works that most people are still unaware of, even today. So if the system quietly changed, why didn't people change with it? That's the next part of this story, and it starts with something most people have felt, but never really named. Life got more expensive in almost every direction at once: housing, healthcare, education, childcare, everyday groceries, all of it climbing faster than most people's paychecks ever could. Think about what a home cost 40 years ago compared to what it costs today relative to the average income. It's not a small difference. It's an entirely different reality. One where a house that used to take a family 5 or 6 years of saving to afford now takes 15 or 20, or sometimes never happens at all. Healthcare tells a similar story. Costs that continue climbing well beyond inflation, year after year. Costs that hit hardest exactly when people are older, exactly when they can least afford surprises. And here's something most people never think about until it's directly in front of them. People are living longer than ever before. That sounds like good news, and in many ways it is. But it also means retirement has to last longer. 20 years, 25, sometimes 30 years of life. That has to be funded entirely by whatever was set aside during the working years. Previous generations didn't face this same math: shorter retirements, lower healthcare costs, pensions that paid for life regardless of how long that life lasted, puzzle that deserves honesty. Many people are quietly counting on government support to fill whatever gap is left, believing that Social Security or whatever the equivalent program is where they live will be enough to cover the difference. But even by conservative estimates, that kind of support was never designed to fully replace an income. It was designed as a supplement, a safety net, not a retirement plan on its own. So when every dollar is already stretched thin, just to cover this month, retirement stops being a priority. It becomes a someday problem. Something to think about later. When things settle down, except things rarely settle down, there's always another expense, another emergency, another reason why later makes more sense than now. And here's the part that makes this so easy to fall into. It doesn't feel like a mistake while it's happening. Nobody wakes up one day and decides, I'm going to skip saving for retirement this year. It happens in small moments. A car repair that eats the savings you were about to set aside, a raise that quietly turns into a slightly nicer lifestyle instead of a slightly bigger investment account, a retirement contribution that gets paused just for a few months and somehow becomes a few years. Each decision on its own seems completely reasonable, but time doesn't care about reasonable. Time only cares about what you actually did, not what you meant to do. And there's something else working against people during all of this, something almost nobody talks about openly. The financial world got more complicated. At the exact same time, it became each person's own responsibility. 401ks, IRAs, Roth conversions, asset allocation, compound interest, market volatility. Most people were never taught any of this. Not in school, not at home, not anywhere. So they're expected to make confident, long-term decisions about a system they were never actually taught to understand. Is it really a surprise that so many people just avoid it? That they let the account sit there, untouched, underfunded, hoping it will somehow be enough when the time comes? Put all of this together: rising costs, longer lifespans, shifting responsibility, limited financial education, and support systems that were never meant to carry the full weight. And you start to see it, not a single dramatic mistake, but a slow, quiet accumulation of pressure from every direction at once. This is the world most people are trying to navigate, often without realizing just how different it is from the world their parents retired into. And understanding this is the first real step toward understanding what actually separates the people who make it from the people who don't. If you asked most people why they aren't further along financially, they'd probably tell you it's because they don't earn enough, that if they just made more money, everything would finally fall into place. And it's an understandable thing to believe. It feels true. It matches how life feels day to day. But here's something that tends to surprise people when they actually look closely at it. Some of the people earning the most money are just as unprepared for retirement as people earning far less. Doctors, lawyers, successful business owners, people who, on paper, should have absolutely no reason to worry, and yet many of them reach 50, 55, 60, and realize they have almost nothing set aside. So if it's not about income, what is it about? It's about a pattern, a very specific, very human pattern that repeats itself regardless of how much someone earns. It goes something like this. Money comes in, bills get paid, life happens, and whatever is left over, maybe, gets saved. Notice the order of that sentence. Income first, spending second, saving last. Whatever is left over. And here's the problem with leftover. There's almost never anything left over. Because as income grows, spending quietly grows right along with it. A bigger paycheck leads to a bigger apartment, a newer car, nicer dinners, better vacations. None of it feels excessive in the moment. It just feels like living a little better, enjoying the results of hard work. This has a name, lifestyle inflation, and it's one of the quietest wealth killers there is because it never feels like a mistake. Every individual upgrade feels earned, feels reasonable, feels like something you deserve after years of hard work. But add them all up over a decade, and you find someone earning significantly more than they used to, with almost nothing extra to show for it, because their spending simply grew to match every raise, every bonus, every bit of extra income that came their way. If saving always comes last, after everything else has already been decided, then saving will always lose. Because there is always something else to spend money on. Always something that feels more urgent, more deserved, more immediate than money sitting untouched in an account for 30 years from now. This is the mistake. Not a single bad decision, but treating retirement like an afterthought instead of a non-negotiable priority. And it's made worse by something else, something almost nobody admits out loud. Most people wait for the right time to start taking it seriously. When they get a raise, when the debt is paid off, when the kids are older, when things are less stressful. There's always a reasonable-sounding reason to wait a little longer. There's also a quieter reason many people wait, one that has nothing to do with money at all. Fear. Fear of looking at the numbers and not liking what they see. Fear of admitting they're behind. Fear of a topic that feels overwhelming and complicated. So instead of facing it, they avoid it. And avoidance feels like relief in the short term, but it comes at an enormous cost over the long term. Because retirement doesn't wait, time doesn't pause while you get ready, and the years that get lost while waiting for the perfect moment are the exact years that matter most. Because of something most people underestimate completely, the difference between starting early and starting eventually. That difference isn't small. It isn't a few percentage points here or there. It's the single biggest factor separating the people who retire comfortably from the people who retire broke. And to really understand why, we need to look at what the people who get this right actually do differently. It's not a secret investment. It's not some hidden loophole. It's not access that only wealthy people have. It's something far simpler and far more uncomfortable than most people expect. They flip the order. Remember that pattern from before: income first, spending second, saving last. The people who actually build real retirement wealth do the exact opposite. They pay themselves first. Before the nicer apartment, before the newer car, before anything else gets decided, a portion of every paycheck disappears into an account they don't touch. Not what's left over, not if there's a room this month. First, it sounds almost too simple to matter. But this single shift changes everything downstream. Because when saving happens first, spending automatically adjusts to fit what remains, instead of saving, trying, and failing to fit into whatever's left after spending. And here's what makes this even more powerful. It's not just about the money they set aside, it's about when they set it aside. This is where something most people never fully grasp comes in, something called compound interest. Money that's invested doesn't just sit there, it grows. And then the growth itself starts growing, year after year, quietly multiplying. A dollar invested at 30 has decades to compound. Decades to multiply on top of itself, again and again. That same dollar, invested at 50, barely has time to grow at all. This is why starting early matters so much more than starting big. Someone who invests modest amounts in their 20s and 30s can end up with more, far more, than someone who invests much larger amounts starting in their 40s or 50s. Not because they were smarter, not because they earned more, simply because time did most of the work for them. And the people who understand this don't wait for the perfect moment. They don't wait until they earn more, or until debt is paid off, or until things feel less stressful. They start small, and they start immediately. Because they understand something most people miss completely: time in the market matters far more than timing the market. The other thing they understand, thus, is that lifestyle can wait, but time cannot. They're not necessarily earning more than everyone else. Many of them live quieter, more modest lives than people who will end up retiring with nothing. They simply made a decision early on to treat their future self as someone worth paying before anyone else gets paid. That's it. That's the difference. Not a secret, not a shortcut, just a decision made consistently over a long enough period of time for compounding to do what it does best. And once you see it this clearly, you start to understand exactly why the gap between these two futures, the one where you retire broke and the one where you don't, is decided far earlier than most people ever realize. Let me tell you about two people. We'll call them Robert and Gary. Both grew up in the same kind of neighborhood. Both started working right around the same age. Both spent most of their careers in ordinary, respectable jobs. Robert worked as a mechanic. Gary worked in sales. Neither of them ever earned what anyone would call a fortune. In fact, for most of their careers, Gary actually earned more than Robert, sometimes significantly more, especially in his best sales years. If you had asked anyone who knew them both which one was more likely to retire comfortably, almost everyone would have said Gary. He had the nicer car. He took his family on bigger vacations. He upgraded his house twice. He looked by every visible measure like the one who was winning. Robert, meanwhile, drove the same reliable car for almost 15 years. His house was modest. His vacations were simple. Nothing about his life looked particularly impressive from the outside. But here's what nobody could see. At 26 years old, Robert had opened a retirement account and set up an automatic contribution, a small percentage of every paycheck, gone before he ever saw it, before he could be tempted to spend it. He barely noticed it at first. His day-to-day life didn't feel any different. He still went out with friends, still enjoyed his weekends, still lived a full life. He just paid himself first, every single paycheck, for over 30 years. Gary always meant to start. He talked about it more than once. Once things settle down, once the house is paid off, once the kids are through college. Each time something else felt more urgent, and each time it made sense to wait a little longer. By the time Gary turned 50, he finally sat down and looked seriously at his retirement account. What he found was a number far smaller than he expected. Not because he never contributed anything, but because most of his contributions had started far too late to really benefit from decades of growth. There's a third person worth mentioning here too, someone named Linda. Linda didn't earn nearly as much as either of them. She worked as a school administrator, a steady but modest salary, for almost her entire career. But Linda had one habit that made all the difference. Every single time she got a raise, no matter how small, she increased her retirement contribution before she increased her spending. She never felt like she was sacrificing because her lifestyle grew slowly and intentionally, always one step behind her income, never catching up to it completely. By the time Linda reached her 50s, despite never earning a large salary, her account had grown into something that surprised even her financial advisor. Robert, at 50, had a very different kind of morning. He didn't feel wealthy. He still drove that same modest car. He still lived in that same modest house. But when he looked at his account, decades of small, consistent contributions, compounding quietly in the background, had grown into something substantial, something that no longer depended on him working another day to survive. Neither Robert nor Linda did anything extraordinary. Neither of them got lucky. Neither of them had some advantage the other didn't have access to. The only real difference between all three of these people was a decision made early and repeated consistently. Gary earned more and had less to show for it. Robert and Linda earned ordinary incomes and quietly built extraordinary security. This is the story playing out, quietly, in millions of households right now. Similar incomes, similar lives, heading toward completely different retirements. And the difference between them was never about how much they earned. It was about one simple decision, repeated consistently for 30 years. So if you're watching this, and some part of you recognized yourself in Gary's story, here's the good news. It's not too late, not at 35, not at 45, not even at 55. The best time to start was decades ago. The second best time is today. Let's talk about exactly what that looks like, step by step, because vague advice like save more has never actually helped anyone. The first step is the one Robert and Linda both understood. Pay yourself first, before rent, before groceries, before anything else gets decided with your paycheck. A portion needs to leave your account automatically and go somewhere you won't touch it. Automatically is the key word here. Because willpower is unreliable, especially at the end of a long month, when there's always something that feels more urgent than your future. If the money never sits in your checking account long enough to be spent, you never have to rely on willpower at all. The second step is understanding roughly how much. There's no single perfect number that applies to everyone, but a common starting benchmark many financial professionals point to is somewhere around 15% of your income, going toward retirement consistently over your working life. If that sounds like a lot right now, well, that's completely normal. Nobody starts at 15%. Start with whatever feels manageable, even 5%, even 3%. The habit matters more than the number at first, because once the habit exists, it becomes far easier to increase it later. Which brings us to a simple trick that Linda used without even realizing how powerful it was. Every time you get a raise, increase your contribution before you increase your spending. If you get a 5% raise, put half of it toward retirement and let yourself enjoy the other half. That way your lifestyle still improves, but your future improves right alongside it. The third step is understanding just enough to feel confident, not overwhelmed. You don't need to become an expert. You don't need to pick individual stocks or try to predict where the market is heading next. For most people, a simple, diversified, low-cost investment approach, held consistently over decades, outperforms almost every attempt to get clever or time the market perfectly. The goal isn't to be brilliant. The goal is to be consistent. Consistency, applied over 30 years, beats brilliance applied for 3 months and then abandoned. The fourth step is protecting that plan from yourself. This might be the most overlooked part of all, because the biggest threat to most people's retirement isn't a market crash. It's their own future decision to pause contributions or withdraw early. during some stressful moment that feels like an emergency at the time. Life will always bring reasons to stop: a job loss, a medical bill, a moment where pausing feels justified. Sometimes it genuinely is necessary, but for many people, these pauses become permanent. Not because they decided to stop, but because they simply never decided to start again. Building in small safeguards, an emergency fund set aside separately, a plan for what happens if income drops, can be the difference between a temporary pause and an account that never recovers. The fifth step is starting the conversation, even if you feel behind. If you're 45 right now and you haven't started, it can feel almost pointless, like the moment has already passed you by. It hasn't. 20 years is still enough time for meaningful growth. 15 years is still enough time. Even 10 years is better than 0. The version of you at retirement age will always be grateful for the version of you today that decided to start, rather than waiting for a more comfortable moment that may never come. There's a sixth step worth mentioning, one that often gets overlooked entirely. Revisit the plan, not obsessively, not every week checking the account and worrying over every small fluctuation. That kind of attention usually does more harm than good, but once a year, maybe twice, it's worth sitting down and asking a few honest questions. Is the contribution amount still realistic? Has income changed enough to increase it? Is the plan still aligned with where life actually is right now? Circumstances shift. A raise happens. A major expense ends. Priorities change as children grow or as retirement gets closer. The plan that made sense at 30 may need small adjustments by 45 and again by 55. This isn't about perfection, it's about staying engaged enough that the plan keeps working for the life you're actually living instead of running quietly in the background, forgotten for 30 years. If this video helped you see your own financial path a little more clearly, that's exactly why this channel exists. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the conversations still to come, because there's a lot more of this story left to explore, and it might just change the way you think about your own future. Somewhere out there, right now, someone just made a decision about their paycheck. They chose to spend it, or they chose to save a little of it. That decision on its own feels completely unremarkable. Nobody notices it. Nobody applauds it. It doesn't feel like the moment that determines a future, but it is. Retirement isn't decided in one dramatic moment. It's decided in thousands of quiet ones, paycheck after paycheck, year after year, decade after decade. Most people don't retire broke because life happened to them. They retire broke because, without realizing it, they kept choosing today over tomorrow, one small decision at a time. And the people who retire comfortably aren't the ones who had it all figured out from the start. They're simply the ones who decided at some point that their future self deserved to be paid too. Think back to Robert, to Linda. Ordinary people, ordinary incomes, living lives that never looked remarkable from the outside. Their advantage was never visible. It was never something you could see by looking at their car or their house or their vacations. It was quiet, it was patient, and it compounded silently for 30 years while nobody was watching. Gary's story is not a tragedy about someone who failed. It's a story about how easy it is to drift, how easy it is to mean to start and keep meaning to until decades have quietly passed by. The question this video was really asking, underneath everything else, was never, how much do you earn? It was always, what are you choosing to do with it today? This paycheck? This decision? So the real question isn't whether you'll have another paycheck this month. It's what you choose to do with it, and whether the version of you standing here 30 years from now will thank you for that choice, or wonder why you waited so long to make it. Here at The Bigger Picture, we'll always explore the financial questions that truly matter, not with fear, not with sensational headlines, but with honest conversations, clear explanations, and the bigger picture behind every story.